What if one wall could divide not just a city, but the entire world? For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as a scar across Europe, a line of concrete, barbed wire, and armed guards. It wasn't just a barrier of stone, but of fear, ideology, and politics. And then, almost overnight, it was gone. On November 9th, 1989, the world witnessed something extraordinary. The people of Berlin, once separated by a wall of oppression, tearing it down with their bare hands. But how did this wall rise? Why did it fall? And what did its collapse mean for the world? To understand the Berlin Wall, we need to go back to 1945. World War II had ended in ruins. Nazi Germany was defeated, but what followed was not peace, it was division. Germany was carved into 4 zones, controlled by the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, Berlin, the capital. Though lying inside Soviet-controlled territory, was also split into 4. At first, it seemed like a temporary arrangement. But as tensions grew between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union, Germany became the first battlefield of a new kind of war, the Cold War on one side, democracy and capitalism, backed by the West on the other, communism controlled by Moscow. By 1949, 2 Germanys were born: West Germany, Federal Republic of Germany, aligned with the West; East Germany, German Democratic Republic, a Soviet satellite state. Berlin became a divided city, an island of freedom in the middle of communist territory. Between 1949 and 1961, nearly 3 million East Germans escaped to the West, many through Berlin. They were doctors, engineers, teachers, workers, people East Germany desperately needed. For the East German regime, this mass exodus was a disaster. By 1961, they had to act. On the night of August 13th, 1961, Berliners went to bed in one city and woke up in 2. East German soldiers and workers rolled out barbed wire and began building walls of concrete. Roads were cut off. Subway lines were closed. Families were split overnight. Imagine, one morning, you wake up and your grandmother, your job, your friends, all now trapped on the other side of a wall you cannot cross. The wall quickly became more than bricks. It grew taller, wider, deadlier. Armed guards, watchtowers, mines, and a death strip made escape almost impossible. Yet still, thousands tried. Many succeeded. Hundreds died. The Berlin Wall became the ultimate symbol of the Cold War. In 1963, U.S. President John F. Kennedy stood before a massive crowd in West Berlin and declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner, I am a Berliner." His words gave hope, but they also confirmed Berlin's role as the front line of East versus West. Meanwhile, the Soviets, under leaders like Nikita Khrushchev and later Leonid Brezhnev, used the wall to prove their control. The wall was not just concrete, it was propaganda. For the West, it symbolized tyranny. For the East, it was called the Anti-Fascist Protection Rampart, a wall to protect socialism. But behind the slogans, ordinary East Germans lived in fear. Secret police, known as the Stasi, monitored every move. One wrong word could cost you your job, your freedom, or worse. By the 1980s, the cracks in the wall weren't just physical, they were political. In Moscow, a new Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced reforms. Glasnost openness gave people more freedom to speak. Perestroika, restructuring, tried to fix the collapsing Soviet economy. But these reforms had unintended consequences. They gave Eastern Europeans hope. In 1989, Poland held free elections. Hungary opened its border with Austria. Suddenly, East Germans found new escape routes. Thousands fled westward through Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Inside East Germany, frustration boiled over. In cities like Leipzig, peaceful protests filled the streets. The people chanted, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." The East German government tried to hold on, but the tide of history was against them. And then came November 9th, 1989. That evening, an East German official, during a press conference, mistakenly announced that travel restrictions were lifted immediately. Within hours, thousands of East Berliners flooded the checkpoints. Border guards, confused and overwhelmed, had no clear orders. Do they shoot? Do they open the gates? Finally, at 10:45 p.m., the first checkpoint opened. People surged through, hugging, cheering, crying. Crowds climbed onto the wall itself. They hammered at it with pickaxes, tore chunks away with their hands, and danced in celebration. The world watched live on television. The unthinkable had happened. The Berlin Wall, once the most guarded barrier on Earth, was now just rubble under the feet of its people. The fall of the Berlin Wall changed everything. Within a year, Germany was reunited. Across Eastern Europe, communist regimes collapsed one after another. In Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria. By 1991, even the Soviet Union itself dissolved. The Cold War, a conflict that had shaped the world for nearly half a century, was over. For millions, it was the dawn of freedom. But it also brought challenges. Reunifying Germany was costly, and Eastern Europe faced economic hardship. Still, the fall of the Berlin Wall remains one of the most powerful moments of the 20th century. Proof that even the strongest walls can crumble when people demand change. The Berlin Wall is not just history. It's a warning and a lesson. It warns us of the dangers of division, of walls built out of fear and ideology. It teaches us that ordinary people, when united, can bring down even the mightiest barriers. Today, pieces of the wall stand in cities across the world, not as symbols of oppression, but of freedom. The fall of the Berlin Wall wasn't just the end of a Cold War. It was the triumph of hope over fear. This event reminds us that history doesn't just belong to the past. It shapes our world today. If you enjoyed learning about this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because history is full of stories that deserve to be remembered.